Pennsylvania. You might associate the Keystone State with numerous iconic images, including the Liberty Bell, the Delaware Water Gap, the Susquehanna River, and the Appalachian Range. This state boasts a wealth of environmental diversity and historically significant land. While many may envision prosperous forests and picturesque fall foliage in Pennsylvania, the verdant wilderness that is now synonymous with the state has not always thrived as it does today.
It was early in the morning when he rode into the town. He came riding from the south.
While many Americans flocked westward in pursuit of gold, another boom was taking place in Pennsylvania, the lumber boom. The apex of the Pennsylvania lumber industry occurred in the middle of the 19th century when prospective loggers rushed to a newly formed town, a mere 50 miles from the New York border, named Williamsport. Williamsport was the ideal destination due to its proximity to the Susquehanna River, as well as its role as a junction for newly developed local rail lines. Williamsport had, in essence, all the necessary components for success in the lumber industry, only awaiting the arrival of loggers. Beginning in 1850, the population of Williamsport surged as an unprecedented number of loggers arrived in the area. In just a few years, the town's population grew by over 1,000% to nearly 16,000 residents, and the logging that followed resulted in the depletion of old-growth forests. By 1895, Pennsylvania had lost nearly 20 million acres of old growth. The once luscious forest was clear-cut, leaving behind a barren wasteland stripped of its once valuable resources.
I would say the effect of really the decline of the lumber industry in Pennsylvania didn't have much effect policy-wise. It didn't happen because the lumber barons wised up and realized that their methods were destructive. It was because they ran out of product.
It was blatantly clear that proper forest management was crucial if Pennsylvania wished for any chance at rectifying the woods that William Penn once had a deep appreciation for. Towards the end of the Pennsylvania lumber boom, future Governor Gifford Pinchot took action to remedy the damage caused to Pennsylvania forests. By challenging the long-standing practices of the lumber industry which were responsible for extensive clear-cutting, he broke conventional thinking and pushed the frontier of forest management into the 20th century. Alongside Teddy Roosevelt, Pinchot started the United States Forest Service, using lessons learned from the destruction in Pennsylvania to guide the forestry efforts of the Forest Service and to start the revival of Pennsylvania's forests. Additionally, Pinchot played a pivotal role in establishing the Pennsylvania School of Forestry, which aimed to educate and prepare an upcoming generation of foresters who aspired to pursue a career which offered a life of outdoor involvement. As Henry Klepper, a student from the Forestry School graduating class of 1920, stated, "Foresters are essentially men of action. Most of us pursue forestry because more than any other profession you might name, it is occasionally hard physically, but always interesting." Consequently, foresters as a class are prone to busy themselves and leave the telling about them to others. The primary objective of this small group was to minimize the rampant forest fires that were devastating what little remained in Pennsylvania forests.
And for the first few years after a clear cutting, the area is very susceptible to fire, to catching on fire, because you've got all of this dry material. And considering train traffic is a major way of transporting and traveling, one stray spark could light an area on fire.
By the early 1900s, up to 170,000 acres of forest were being scorched annually, rendering reforestation efforts nearly futile without fire risk mitigation. In the years following the creation of the forestry program, the majority of the group's efforts were focused on firefighting and fire control, as there were not simply enough foresters to manage both fire prevention and reforestation efforts. The manpower shortage was exacerbated by the outbreak of World War I, further hindering reforestation efforts. These issues were mediated, however, with the establishment of the Civilian Conservation Corps. In the midst of the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal program, which included the Civilian Conservation Corps as a significant component.
And in creating this Civilian Conservation Corps, we are killing two birds with one stone. We are clearly enhancing the value of our natural resources, and at the same time we are relieving an appreciable amount of actual distress. This great group of men, young men, have entered upon their work on a purely voluntary basis. No military training is involved, and we are conserving not only our natural resources, but also our human resources.
The principal aim of the program was to reduce high unemployment rates and aid the crumbling economy. The CCC offered employment opportunities for young men aged 18 through 25 to improve public parks and forests, covering national, state, and government-owned lands. The CCC participants, commonly known as Roosevelt's Tree Army, were obligated to enlist for a minimum of 6 months and were provided food, shelter, and basic necessities. They earned $1 a day, which mostly went back to support their families back home. CCC boys were given 3 square meals a day and lodging in barracks, which were referred to as 3 hots and a cot. Despite the amendment that prohibited racial discrimination in the CCC, African American enrollees were required to reside and work in separate camps. The program entirely excluded women from recruitment. The Pennsylvania Wilds hosted over 150 CCC camps, making Pennsylvania the state with the second largest number of camps in America.
So really, the Civilian Conservation Corps was on the frontier of conservation in America that really helped to promote to the nation the idea of our parks, our forests, and our public land being something worthy of preserving and worthy of putting effort into taking care of and conserving. The Civilian Conservation Corps was able to get out there and these places to put big efforts into development and making them more accessible to the public at large.
The CCC played a critical role in planting over 60 million trees, including pines and hemlocks, which have matured into providing forests, supplying wildlife with sustainable habitats, and recreational opportunities for the public. The CCC helped to shape the state park system as we know it now, and was one of the first conservationist groups who ambitiously set out to save extensive swaths of Pennsylvania forests for the enjoyment of the Commonwealth. Thanks to the CCC's significant contribution, many of Pennsylvania's state parks, such as Cook Forest State Park and Pymatuning State Park, and others, were established. As America suffered from war effort stresses, the CCC was forced to shut its doors in June of 1942. However, it was clear that their work was not finished. To be able to experience the natural beauty the CCC worked so hard to preserve, it has been critical that sustainability is well practiced. Possibly one of the most influential results from the CCC was the widespread adoption of sustainable lumber practices in Pennsylvania. Despite the 60 million trees, over 6,000 miles of roadways and trails, and the countless state parks and structures constructed, the future and security of the Pennsylvania wilds were still unknown. It was evident that it was of the utmost importance to plan for the future stability of Pennsylvania forests. While the logging methods of ages past had once destroyed nearly the entirety of Pennsylvania forests, Pennsylvanians would not let such decimation happen again. In order to ensure this stark reality from becoming a possibility, it was essential that forest management in Pennsylvania did not end with the CCC. A group which rose to the CCC's legacy to protect Pennsylvania's forests was the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Starting in 1943, the program set out to protect the nearly 2.2 million acres of state forest land, as well as manage all of the current logging, natural gas, and other natural resource-based industries that impacted state land. By generating employment opportunities for foresters, accountable practices are implemented, and the lumber sector contributes to the growth of Pennsylvania's economy without the harsh side effects of overzealous woodhicks. Pennsylvanians have been fortunate enough to inherit a state with a deeply ingrained wilderness history, and they should feel proud that despite devastating environmental setbacks, dedicated forestry, conservation, industrial, and legislative efforts by committed Pennsylvanians have spanned over a century. Thanks to this collective hard work, there are now ample forests, wetlands, and outdoor programs that Pennsylvanians can utilize. While indulging in the abundant outdoor activities that Pennsylvania has to offer, we must not forget to pay homage to the trailblazing work of the CCC. In essence, this program played a crucial role in initiating nature conservation and policy in Pennsylvania after the extensive deforestation in the early 1900s. Its legacy is nothing short of inspiring and worth cherishing for generations to come.